my best friend, and I'm glad to hear your voice.
All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro podcast. I am your host, Toby Passman. Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro offers premium brain health coaching to clients globally, along with targeted neuromodulation services to clients interested in peak cognitive performance in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area. Go ahead and check out roscoeswetsuitneuro.com for all of the latest. Subscribe to our email newsletter and book a complimentary free coaching session today to see if brain health coaching is for you. Now onto the show, we have a very special guest, Mariah Heller. Mariah is a fitness industry executive, a gym co-founder, an author, speaker, and the creator of Pain-Free Fitness. Mariah was diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos Syndrome at the age of 28 after dealing with debilitating symptoms for a majority of her life. Her mission is to create a health and fitness environment that welcomes and helps people from all walks of life. She's also the author of 2 ebooks and the creator of Fitness Fundamental Flashcards, a line of flashcards aimed to help fitness professionals add value to their clients. She's been featured on several podcasts and lectures annually at the UC Davis Entrepreneurship Academy. So Mariah, I'm really happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to just kind of sit down and chat with you.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little about kind of getting into the fitness industry, I guess, or maybe actually we could first just kind of talk about your life leading up to that and what I had mentioned, kind of you dealing with kind of these symptoms for a while. Was it sort of like a mystery thing, like you didn't necessarily know what it was before it got diagnosed?
Yeah, pretty much. So with Ehlers-Danlos and with a lot of chronic pain disorders or syndromes, illnesses, things like that, the average time from the onset of symptoms to the actual diagnosis is usually 10 to 12 years. And for me, that was very true. So I started to deal with some chronic pain when I was 16. And I had been a martial artist for my whole life. So I had a second degree black belt, and I actually started CrossFit when I was 16 as well. And I started to just have consistent issues with my knees. And at the time, it was chalked up to doing high impact exercise, being an athlete, just kind of being active. And then over the next couple of years, it was kind of, I would get these pains and they would not go away. Whereas in the beginning, kind of first part of my life, I would get pain here and there, but it would go away. Once I hit 16, that stopped happening and the pain became chronic and it stayed around. And eventually I actually had to get my hip reconstructed. I had to get a hernia surgery on one side. And really all of the doctors that I talked to were just kind of like, well, rest or stop working so hard, and there was never really an answer as far as like what was going on with me. And that's actually what drew me to the fitness industry, because at the time my coaches had no idea what to do with me. They were just kind of like, I don't know what to do, you're going to have to figure it out when you're here, and it made me feel very misfitted in the gym environment. It made me feel very kind of hopeless and I never wanted any clients to feel that way. So I became a coach, I became a trainer, and then I also became a manual therapist several years ago as well, so that I could kind of blend the two worlds. And out came Pain-Free Fitness, and that's been my business ever since. So I help clients that are dealing with chronic pain and injuries, usually in conjunction with some physical therapy or other, kind of more formal medical treatment for them, because I'm not a medical practitioner. And then also I train trainers as well. That's kind of the other side, because I want to get to the root of the problem as well. And I think if we can educate and have a more conscious generation of trainers and coaches, that'll help the problem a whole lot.
What are some of the most common things, I guess, that result in people dealing with a lot of pain when training? Like, is it overtraining or lack of like rest and recovery? Or like what sort of things kind of lead to those kind of chronic pain conditions that plague like a lot of athletes and just fitness enthusiasts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it very much depends, at least in my experience, and I've been in the fitness industry for about 12 years. But in my experience, it depends on the audience. So if you're working with a group of athletes, let's say the CrossFit community or, anyone else that kind of takes fitness very seriously, generally it's exactly what you were saying, with people not really listening to their bodies, maybe being a little bit too quote unquote tough for their own good, and so they'll feel something coming on or they'll feel something nagging for a while and they just will not stop, because a lot of the time in that environment, you're very adrenalized. You get that endorphin rush after hitting a hard workout, or you're with a group of people that are all doing a certain thing and you feel pressured to do that thing as well, or you just really enjoy it and you don't want to let it go. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum with the athlete community. On the other end of the spectrum, I think for the general population, and this is aside from people with chronic illnesses like myself, but just kind of the everyday person, maybe a busy professional that wants to be active, but they hurt. I think it's normally because there's an issue between their everyday life and then their gym life kind of coming into conflict with each other. So if you're in the gym for an hour a day and you're trying to move in certain ways, but the way that you behave for 8 hours at the office, like you're sitting and you're in a hunched over position and you have a bunch of tight muscles and you're compensating without knowing it and you've already kind of hurt, and then you go and you don't correct that, but you try to work out and get intense work in, you're probably just going to stress your system further. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. And then there's a bunch of things kind of in between. But I think generally speaking, we can take it down to a lack of body awareness and a lack of kind of caring for ourselves as a consequence of having that awareness.
Tell me about what are some of the skills or kind of traits that you've found that are needed in order to best serve your clients, as far as being a really good trainer.
Yeah. Oh, this is such a good question. So there's a really interesting development of trainers that I've noticed just kind of in the years of, owning my own gyms, being in management. I run the operations and the fitness side of a multi-million dollar fitness company now. So I work with about 40 coaches. And there's such an interesting development of just the skill versus the empathy and all of that. But I've noticed that for the first kind of 6 months of a trainer's development, and I promise I'll get to your question, this is just kind of some context, but for the first kind of 6 months of a new trainer's development, they're generally a little bit gun shy. They might have some imposter syndrome. They haven't worked with a lot of people. They feel a little bit self-conscious and they're very hesitant to tell people to do anything. And then you reach the 6 month mark through probably about 2 years, and it's almost the opposite. It's like people's confidence swings in one direction and they decide, I know exactly what I'm doing. I've done this for 6 months now. I can tell you exactly what to do, and what I say goes, and that's all that goes. Right. And then after about the 2 year mark, you start to realize, like, oh, maybe sometimes what I say doesn't go. And that is where I feel like people start to evolve into really, really good coaches. So I think the first skill that anyone should look for in a trainer, and if you are a trainer that you should try to develop, is a growth mindset. Something that I tell trainers all of the time is that if you are not replacing a pretty good percentage of your knowledge every couple of years in this industry, you're probably not growing enough to serve your clients well, because research in this industry goes fast and there's some things that stay consistent. There's a lot of things that don't. So you want to keep in mind that what you know today might be very different than what you know 2 years from today. And that's okay. That's how it should be. The other thing that I think makes a really good trainer or a coach is the ability to listen. So what I tell clients all the time is, if you go into an initial assessment with a trainer and they are talking more than you talk, that's a pretty big red flag, because training is about the client. It's not about the trainer. And unfortunately, this industry does attract people that tend to swing it more that way. No beef with anybody. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And then the other thing is that we want to make sure that in that listening to them, we are building whatever we need to build as far as their program goes around their goal and what they actually want. Because far too often, what we see, especially with those newer coaches in the 6 month to 2 year range that I was talking to you about, we see them, you know, their client might come in and say, I want to train for a marathon. And then the coach says, well, I really think you should put some more muscle on. So here's a bodybuilding program, you know, and it's just, you're not listening, you're not absorbing anything, and the client's not getting what they want. So that kind of in combination with not encouraging people to push through pain and things like that, like just really educating yourself with a lot of different bodies, making sure that you kind of know you always have a plan B for your clients. That's a big thing too. So there's a lot of stuff that you kind of learn over the years with coaching. And that's why I think it's so important to just get in front of as many people as you can and be humble.
And something you alluded to in the kind of the first part of the answer to that question was about like learning a lot of new things kind of every couple years, the kind of developments. I was just wondering if you could maybe give like an example of something, say that you now do differently as a coach or trainer that maybe you switched based off, you know, some emerging research.
Yeah, I love that question. And there's actually a lot of examples of this. There's some of the, I guess, more granular examples, which might bore people, but just for example, like there's a movement called a hip thrust or a glute bridge, right? And for like a long time, everybody was doing that movement with their toes off the floor. And a year ago, I went to a certification and they were kind of explaining that you want your ankles to be mobile, you want your knees to be stable. When you pull your toes up off the floor, you're locking your ankle into place, you're putting all of your pressure on that knee. So keep your toes on the floor. And then, you know, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to now coach that movement with the toes on the floor, even though for the last 10 years, I've coached it the other way. There's a bunch of examples like that, even like full on like movements that used to be staples in people's routines that we're now starting to learn, like, all right, like, you know, probably very few people should be doing barbell movements from the floor, like just kind of based on how people's bodies are today, how much we sit, how little mobility we have, things like that. And then on the other side of it, there's also a lot of really interesting research coming out on the manual therapy side that kind of shows you that you don't really need all of the like deep tissue work and kind of all of that stuff that we used to just, you know, we used to go crazy with. You're gonna get into your trigger points with a lacrosse ball, or you're gonna come and be on my massage table and I'm gonna stick my elbow like right in your shoulder and it's gonna be amazing. You don't really need that. Like literally, you just need like some contact on the skin in order to get like the exact same effect. So there's a lot of stuff that comes out like that it makes you think. And for me, as long as you can explain it to me and I can kind of like see that there's overwhelming evidence, or at least a good amount of evidence that things are moving in that direction, I'm totally willing to change the way that I do things, because I think that's how you've got to be.
Awesome. Mariah, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of the fitness kind of the fitness industry at large, because
Yeah.
I'd seen in your bio, so you're the executive program director of a multi-million-dollar fitness company, and I just kind of wanted to talk about kind of, you know, what you've learned doing that, just about how the fitness industry operates, and just, yeah, kind of what's that experience been like?
Oh boy, there's a lot I could say about that. The fitness industry is an awesome place. It's also a very challenging place. It's a very male dominated space, like fitness in general. So I experienced a lot of this going into fitness entrepreneurship when I owned my gym. And I'm still kind of experiencing that now in this space, that just kind of being a female in the industry, this is an industry where loud voices and people that talk more get rewarded. So if you want to have any kind of authority and if you want to be respected at all, you kind of have to acclimate to that, and you have to match that energy. And that's something that was really hard for me for a long time. I think otherwise, I really think the fitness industry as a whole is becoming a lot more conscious. I think 10 years ago, there was a lot more segregation of I'm a CrossFitter and everything else sucks. And I'm a yogi over here and everything else sucks. And I'm a runner and all of you are stupid, you know? And I think now people are starting to recognize, like, you can do a variety of different things and no one thing is better than anything else, as long as the client is happy and you're moving and your body's healthy. So I see the fitness industry moving more in that direction. I think it's just moving that way a little bit slower than I would like it to. The way I want it to go is, what does the most amount of good for the largest number of people? And if we can all get on the same page about that as an industry and let our egos go out of the situation, I just think that it would do a lot more good for a lot more people. So that's kind of how I feel about that. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, I mean, I definitely, just from kind of being an outsider looking in, definitely, it's pretty noticeable, just the divisions between, or at least, maybe kind of past divisions between, CrossFitters versus, you know, Olympic people who are into Olympic lifting versus yoga,
Yeah.
whatever, kind of in the same way that, diet nutrition seems so divisive. So
Yes.
that's an interesting and kind of maybe a good direction, I guess, that things are moving in kind of a more collaborative way.
Yeah. Yeah, I really hope so. And I know that there is some form of kind of tribalism, and maybe even to go as far as to say dogma, in pretty much every industry. But I think since this industry is so new, and since, to be quite honest, there's kind of a low barrier to entry into the fitness industry as a professional, you see a lot more of that, and it's harder to kind of break out of collectively.
Got it. Let's go back to I guess talking a bit about chronic pain. There are a couple things on your bio that I just had noticed, as far as kind of talking about reframing the chronic pain, and kind of what does that mean to you to reframe the pain?
Yeah, so this I would actually love to get your take on as well, because I feel like you would have some really interesting thoughts here. But I have kind of a, I guess, a 5-step system for dealing with chronic pain, or dealing with any kind of pain, but works really well for chronic pain. And the first step is changing your perception of the pain. Like, that is the foundation, and that you really can't move on until you do that. So just kind of the overview is, it's perception, body awareness, stability, mobility, and movement. That's kind of the pyramid. And the foundation of that is the perception. So what we are finding, especially in the last couple of years, I mean, I'm sure this research has been around for a long time, but what we're just kind of starting to get a handle on is that, obviously, mechanically, pain originates in the brain, right? Like, you get some kind of an impulse or a stimulus that sends a signal to the brain that something is wrong and you feel pain, right? But we're also learning that our perception of the pain and how we talk about it and how we think about pain makes a huge difference in how much pain we actually feel. So the first thing that I try to do with people is I actually take them through a drill where I say, what is the worst possible case scenario that could happen with your X pain, your shoulder pain, your knee pain, something like that, right? And usually it's something like, well, it never heals and it never gets better, and it's always the same, and it's, this is just how it is now. And I have them actually write that down and acknowledge that, and then try to think of, like, okay, if that was the case, which I hope it's not, but if it is, what can you do? What are some creative ways you can get around that? What are the things you still can do in your life, right? Because far too often We get hurt and all we do is focus on the things that we can't do anymore. My back hurts. I can't lift. I can't run. It's terrible. I'm in pain all the time. Every time I get out of bed, it hurts. Whereas if we took more of an approach like, yes, my back hurts. I'm acknowledging that. I'm going to do something every single day to try to be proactive and address it. But in the meantime, I'm going to accept my back pain like it's kind of a visitor, and I'm going to have a symbiotic relationship with it while also working to make it better. You're actually going to find that you report feeling less pain. So that was kind of a roundabout answer, but perception and the brain and the mind and kind of that neuro-linguistic aspect are huge when it comes to pain stuff. And I would love to get, your take on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, borne out kind of in the research as far as like just whatever our mind kind of we tell ourselves to be true, or whatever we continue like focusing on, right? Kind of draws more neural resources to whatever that thing is. So it makes a lot of sense if if someone's, dealing with pain, and they're gonna, place a lot of their attention on that pain, it's only gonna kind of magnify it. So yeah, I mean, I would just agree with what you're saying there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people unfortunately conflate that with me saying ignore it. And I'm definitely not saying that. I think your approach should be proactive, but you can actually tell, like, if two clients come to me with the exact same injury, the way that they talk about their injury and their pain, I can actually usually predict pretty well how much pain they're going to report on a pain scale of 1 to 10. Because the person that has a much more focus on all the things that they can't do anymore and how much it just sucks to be in pain all the time and how they're always thinking about it and they feel it, versus the person that feels it, but they kind of do what they can to work around it. Even if they have the exact same injury, person B is going to report feeling it quite a bit less. So that's kind of the way I try to frame it for people. I'm not minimizing anything. The issue is still present, but let's change the way we talk about it and think about it.
Right, right. I mean, it also, maybe this isn't exactly the same thing, but I guess I think a lot about just with, athletics in general, just kind of the ability to, not disassociate from the pain, but be able to feel the pain and continue going. Being kind of what might separate, the elite from, from the rest of the crowd is like, I mean, just that kind of sheer like willpower to kind of set your mind to say like, I'm gonna accomplish whatever it is. And pretty much any sport is going to come, it seems like, with some amount of pain. So kind of your ability to kind of use kind of mind over matter, I guess, seems like a pretty neat ability, I guess, some people have.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually one of the things that has drawn me away from working with the athlete community, because, like, as an athlete, you do have to have that. Like, you have to have the ability to be able, like you said, to disassociate and almost quote unquote push through that in the moment. And with the population that I work with, there's a little bit of an alternative to that, which is, let's think about the goal that you're trying to accomplish with this thing that you're doing. Why were you deadlifting in the gym? Well, I was deadlifting because I wanted to be strong. Why do you want to be strong? I want to be strong because of X, Y, and Z, right? And you can kind of get to the root cause for like why someone is doing a specific thing. And then once you can get to that, you have kind of the main goal and their why. And then there's like 10 other ways that we can get there that doesn't involve doing something that's messing you up in the process. So it's like, let's think about the main goal and the other paths that we can take. And that's generally the way that I will go with my clients. But if you're an athlete, if you're a competitive athlete, you're right. There is kind of an approach that's like, well, it's got to get done and it's got to get done this way. And that scares me
I hear
So
you.
I tend to not really work with the athlete community that much because I'm so sensitive to that.
Tell me, so as far as like with a client who might come to you and you're talking about kind of um getting clear as far as like the focus or like kind of the why behind, why they want to, do a certain exercise or whatever. Like what are some of the common things, I guess, that people come to you with? Like as far as do people just want to increase muscle mass or, you know, get get leaner, or is it do you get more kind of complex, like kind of uh whys behind why people are coming to you as a client?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get kind of a decent mix, but generally speaking, the populations that I work with are general populations. So kind of the busy professional that just sort of wants to stay moving and wants to, play with their kids and their grandkids in 10 years and be able to kind of do the things that they like. And then there's people that have been in pain for a long time. So I've had clients that have muscular dystrophy. I've had clients that, are ex-military and they have like literal, like, bullets in their body still, like, things like that. So those are kind of the two populations that I tend to get. It's like they're already injured and they want to kind of get back to a baseline, or they're maybe a busy professional, they're nagging aches and pains, and they want to just be able to do things that they enjoy doing. Um, so those are the two types of population that I get. And generally speaking, when it comes to like getting to the root cause of things, it's really interesting because I've talked about this on a couple of podcasts before, but it's like people identify very strongly with the specific activity that they're doing. And this kind of goes back to some of the segregation that we were talking about. People tend to not just identify as like an active person. They identify as a weightlifter. Like that's who I am. I'm a weightlifter. I go and I lift weights every day. People identify as a runner. And when that thing goes away because you hurt yourself and you can't do it anymore without aggravating that pain, there's a little bit of a mourning period that you go through. And that's where doing that root cause exercise really helps. You say someone comes to me with a shoulder injury and they're just really bummed out because they can't do any overhead movements anymore. Okay. Why were you doing overhead movements in the first place? Right. Well, I was doing overhead movements because I liked them. Okay. Why did you like them? Because they helped me to build muscle in my upper body. Okay. So is that what you want to do? You want to build muscle in your upper body and kind of still maintain your strength? Yeah, I think that's what I want to do. All right. Well, then there's a bunch of ways we can do that without going overhead. There's a bunch of ways we can do that without even really having you like move a whole lot in your upper body. We just work on stability for a while and kind of try to address that. So once you can get to the root, it gets easier, but getting people to let go of the specific activity is hard. There's a mourning process there.
Absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
as far as we may have already covered some of this, but I just noticed something else on your bio as far as the kind of secret causes of chronic pain. And I know I
Mm.
had already asked you a question earlier before, kind of about the common causes of chronic pain, but I just wanted to know if those secret causes encompassed anything else that we haven't discussed yet.
Yes. So it's a great question. We haven't really been over that specific topic yet. So when it comes to the causes of pain, or I guess I'll back up a little bit. So if you go to really any, let's just say like general practitioner, or even still like most trainers, if you go to them and you report that your knee is hurting or your hip is hurting or your shoulder's hurting, the first thing that they're going to tell you to do is to stretch. Like that's usually the first thing they'll just tell you to do. Well, you must need to stretch more, or you must need to foam roll more, right? And so that in itself is based on the premise that the cause of all pain is a lack of mobility. And that is not true. And it's a very, very under acknowledged kind of thing. But we need to couple the increase in mobility with also an increase in stability. And not to mention, some people don't need to increase their mobility at all. So in my case, Ehlers Danlos is what's called a hypermobility syndrome. If someone's joints regularly move past their normal range of motion, which a lot of people do, a lot of people deal with this and they just don't know it because it's not really widely acknowledged. You are at a much higher risk of injury than you think you are. And so sometimes you don't need to stretch at all. You don't need to foam roll at all. You need to work on getting stable. So that is a huge piece of pain management that's just missing from most places right now. And it's a little bit frustrating just being someone that, like, for 10 years, I had no idea what was going on. And then we find out that this was, at least a large part of the cause of why I had so many joint dislocations and surgeries and all of that. It's an interesting thing that the industry hasn't caught on to it more heavily.
If you could sort of, and I don't know if this kind of varies by, I guess, body part and body area, but like as far as general ways to increase stability, what would you say?
Stability is generally increased by doing things that are isometric in nature, which means they are holds. And I think that's also why people don't really like to do it, because it's kind of boring, to be honest. But things like, I don't know, even single leg balance, that's really good for stability, like literally like balancing on one leg for like 30 seconds. If I have a client with like an ankle injury or something, that's something I might have them do. Things like static band holds, where I might be getting into a certain position with the band and just locking it into place and holding it there and trying to squeeze all my muscles around the shoulder joint and squeeze my lats and really engage. That's going to be good for stability. Things like plank holds, there's like a bunch of other stuff in there, but generally it's stuff that's isometric in nature. Like you're trying to challenge your balance and your stability while kind of keeping the rest of your body completely in control. That's the stuff that is helpful for stability. And it's not fun and it's very humbling. And I think that's part of the reason people don't love to do it.
Is there a specific like order as far as when you're like working on both kind of stability and mobility? Do you do one before the other, or are they kind of interchangeable?
It kind of depends. If I'm working with a hypermobile client or just someone that generally has like good mobility all around, because there's actually assessments you can do like in each joint just to kind of see how well someone's moving. So if I'm working with someone that has decent mobility or extra mobility as is, I always start with stability with them. If I'm working with somebody that maybe is on the opposite end of the spectrum and for the most part they are lacking in mobility, I might do a little bit of that work first. And then usually we need to throw in some stability work there as well, because being lacking in mobility is not the same as having stability. And a lot of people kind of conflate the two sometimes. But generally speaking, I do try to pair them up. So if I'm making kind of a schedule for the workout for the day for one of my clients, I'll usually have them do stability and activation drills prior to their workout. And then afterwards, we'll do a little bit more mobility stuff.
Awesome. Um, Mariah, I wanted to ask you as far as I saw the line of flashcards. I think I mentioned in the introduction the fitness fundamentals flashcards. Tell me about kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really cool idea. Like, tell me kind of what inspired the idea and what like kind of the purpose of the flashcards are.
Yeah, absolutely. So fitness fundamentals flashcards, these were actually born from a couple of trainings that I was doing with like my staff. And I have a specific model where I teach coaches how to cue movements, because unfortunately, I mentioned that there was kind of a low barrier to entry to the fitness industry previously. A new trainer could be a certified personal trainer and have never worked with a client in person before. And the consequence of that is that what you get is you get a lot of people that know what they want to say, but they have no idea how to say it. And so I developed a queuing model, which is called the start, execute, finish. And it basically has 1 to 2 key points of each movement. So for the squat, you're going to start with your feet shoulder width, standing upright, toes slightly turned out. The execute might be, all right, push your butt back, bend the knees, send the butt back and down. The finish is going to be drive through the heels, stand up to that starting position and squeeze your glutes at the top. That's it. It's nice and simple. On each card, there's also a place for notes. So the cards are actually broken into categories that you can see here. Like this is one of them, and it's probably backwards for you. But you've got the cues up here, and then you've got a little note section, because everything, whether you're using these as a trainer or as just like a client, everything is very subjective. So maybe you want to say something differently, or maybe I'm a client and I have to do this just a little bit differently because it works better for my anatomy. That's where you can write that stuff down. And then there's also like the common equipment that's used like for the exercise, you know, this is normally performed with your body weight and maybe with a band or something like that. So that's there as well. So it was really meant to just kind of like help trainers, but also help the general population feel like they're performing exercises safely, and then help coaches and trainers feel like they have something to practice to say with their cues. Because otherwise you just kind of wind up talking in circles and nobody really understands what you're saying.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I
Yeah.
could I could definitely use some of those like cue cards for like deadlifts, and
Yeah.
that's
I've got deadlifts in here.
yeah,
Yeah. I'd
that's
be
one. It's
happy to
like
send you one. Yeah.
I'm always questioning whether my form is right on that. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
um well, Mariah, we're coming up onto the end of the show.
Mhm.
But I wanted to kind of just get your take on just kind of as we move forward with just kind of, or as you move forward with your coaching and training practice, along with just the whole, wellness, fitness industries that we've talked about. Like, what are some of the exciting things on the horizon, I guess, for both? I guess we could answer both for you along with just kind of the overall fitness and wellness industries.
Absolutely. So I think I'm really excited to see the industry grow more in the direction of everybody kind of adopting a growth mindset, and a true growth mindset, right? Where we actually try to seek out things that we might not know, or things that we might be, quote unquote, wrong about right now. And we adapt in order to better serve our clients that way. And so I think seeing the industry become more growth minded, to see the industry become more empathetic, and just kind of build a generation of people that can listen to the clients a little bit better. I'm really excited to see that. And I think it is happening. I do see it happening in small chunks and small pockets. So I love that. For me personally, I have a lot of exciting things going on this year, but the flashcards, so these guys are going to be actually officially launching next month. It's June right now. So they're going to launch end of July, which is super exciting. I'm also writing a book on the topic. So I have a couple of ebooks already. I'm writing a book specifically geared toward trainers, which kind of walks them through how to start with, from maybe introducing themselves to a client or a class, to cueing them, to level 2 cueing, and what to do in certain situations with injuries and everything like that. So that's been a really fun kind of passion project for me. And those are the exciting things.
Just a quick question that came up, do trainers not usually get too much, I guess, practice or training, I guess, in some of those things that you're talking about, like working with
They
clients?
They don't. So most of the really reputable certifications can actually just be done with a book and taking a test. So you can order a book online. You can read through all of the rules about, the food plate and, the food pyramid and the physiological stuff behind maybe, various pieces of the body and the anatomy and kinesiology. But when it comes to actually being able to put that into practice with people, you can be a certified personal trainer and never have done that before. And that's where we see a lot of issues pop up, because you just don't have practice, and you need practice in order to keep people safe.
Right on. Well, Mariah, I've really enjoyed having you on the show today. If people want to learn more about your work or find your ebooks or get in touch with you, where would you direct them to?
Yeah, thank you so much. My website is painfree-fitness.com. You can also just search Mariah Heller Pain-Free Fitness. It'll come up. And I have an email list that you can sign up for if you'd like. I put out a blog every week. Usually it's on just kind of like a common question that I get about pain management, or maybe modifying workouts to meet your needs, things like that. So I have a weekly blog that goes up every Sunday. And yeah, I'd be happy to chat with any of you guys. I'm on Instagram, Pain Free Fitness. Yeah, that's
Perfect.
me.
Perfect. Well, and for those listeners who enjoyed the show, go ahead and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're Roscoe's Wetsuit. You can also find audio versions of the podcast available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and just about anywhere else that audio podcasts are available. And also, if you guys enjoyed the show today, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That would be greatly appreciated. Mariah, again, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to see what you do in the future as well.